Hey folks, Edgar B. Herwick III here from GBH's Curiosity Desk, where you ask questions and I find answers. You know, this time of year, you do not have to work that hard to find a jack-o'-lantern staring square at you. From your television screen, a store window, somebody's front porch, heck, even your phone. But why is it that we carve faces into pumpkins at Halloween? If you're gonna carve a scary face into a bright orange pumpkin, the first thing you need is a bright orange pumpkin. And that this unmistakable icon of the autumn is so readily available today is a story thousands of years in the making.
When you focus on a particular piece like squash, or even particularly like the pumpkin, you know, it is hard to trace because there's only so much information in history that survived colonialism. You see a lot of production starting at the bottom of Mexico and moving both directions. It's got such an old history that goes back pre-colonial for thousands of generations. Find like all these ancient recipes that date way back into the Mayans.
From there, the squash, including the pumpkin, steadily made its way through North America.
There's so many tribes across the United States, and there's so much diversity. And within each of these regions where there was agriculture, people had innovated and grown all sorts of different varietals of squash. And those particular pieces are celebrated for generations as these families held on to these and grew them over and over again for generations upon generations.
By the time Europeans arrived here, peoples, including the Pueblo in the southwest, the Cherokee in the southeast, the Ojibwe in the Great Lakes, and the Wampanoag in the northeast, cultivated all sorts of squash and pumpkins. Here in New England, European colonists began doing the same. And in the 1800s, one squash in particular, the Connecticut field pumpkin, was separated from the pack, so to speak.
More people are moving into cities. The squash kind of goes into these European markets, but the pumpkin, like the big round orange Connecticut field pumpkin, that one stays behind on the farm.
Stayed behind because, unlike a number of its cousins, it didn't really sell well at market. It was grown on small, rural farms, mainly for animal fodder. But come on, it did look great.
It's a cultural story. That way that the orange field pumpkin became the pumpkin because it was a part of that old-fashioned way of making a living off of land. In America, we inculcate great values in that, you know, these agrarian ideals. And so it becomes popular to Americans because of the deep stories that they invested in it.
And became a centerpiece of autumn celebrations, from harvest festivals and county fairs to emerging new American holidays like Thanksgiving and, yes, Halloween.
Certainly there were immigrants from Ireland, Scotland, England who had come over who were familiar with this kind of holiday and had heard of it and were practicing it. But here in this country, after the Civil War, Americans were interested in ghosts. They were interested in exotic places like Highland Scotland, and there was a lot of inexpensive media, magazines and newspapers that collected stories about this wonderful, spooky, otherworldly holiday, and Americans loved it.
As for how the pumpkin became the jack-o'-lantern, Bannatyne says a good place to start is with the name.
Jack-o'-lantern is an actual light. It's combusted gas. It's found over marshes or sometimes at sea, but it spawned folklore the world over about a character named Jack who fooled the devil, was mean to the devil, bested the devil, but when it came time to die, the devil wouldn't let him into hell and gave him a piece of coal and said, go wander the earth. So the folklore explains this light that appears and disappears always.
And that myth found a new home in the American pumpkin patch, thanks to a little 19th century prank that became popular among kids in rural New England.
They would steal pumpkins from a field, carve faces in them, light them up, hang them on a stick, and float them in front of farmers' windows or pop up from behind walls and scare people. And it was called the jack-o'-lantern trick eventually because it was something that appeared and disappeared quickly.
Now, plenty of sources will tell you that the jack-o'-lantern was inspired by the Celts, who carved faces into turnips around Samhain, that pagan spirit festival that inspired many aspects of our Halloween. But
that's not entirely true. In fact, if you look through all the folklore collections, you can't find these carved faces until the 1800s. So it became associated with All Saints, All Souls, and Halloween very recently.
Bannatyne says we carve pumpkins today because our parents and our grandparents did. And jack-o'-lanterns first caught on at a time when most Americans had no direct connection to Samhain or the Celts. More likely, they simply thought that the jack-o'-lantern was cool the first time they saw one, in a newspaper, magazine, or postcard. you know, kind of the 19th century version of social media.
In the late 1800s, Halloween becomes really popular in America because hostesses pick it up from the magazines and start throwing Halloween parties. It's about bringing the outdoors inside for party decorations, and they carved faces on them to make them more interesting and more spooky and to give more atmosphere. So for the first time, the jack-o'-lantern sits still in a party. It doesn't run around and scare people. It's a decoration.
And so it remains with us today as a symbol of the season.
Whether people are celebrating the pumpkin on Halloween for that situation, or whether it's a part of a big harvest fest for a certain tribe somewhere, you know, there's like so much pride that goes into those pieces, you know, and I think that's also important to realize how deeply it touches people.
Well, there you have it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and perhaps most importantly, let me know what you are curious about, because hey, I might just look into it for you. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Stay curious out there, because hey, I might just look into it for you. That was like, you could tell that was not going well, right? Like